Welcome to the Wellness Pulse with Monica Stevens. From CPR to self care, staying in rhythm with your well being. Thanks for tuning in. Good day, everyone. I've got Kim and Matt Mangine from the One Shot Foundation with us today. How are you both doing?
Doing well. Thank you for
Doing
having
well.
us.
Good. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. So why don't you both tell me a little bit about yourselves and then tell me a little bit about the One Shot Foundation?
I'm Kim Mangine, co-founder of the Matthew Mangine Jr. One Shot Foundation. Um, if you told me 6 years ago that this is what I would be doing, I'd say you're crazy. I was for majority of my lifetime in a sales role in different various positions and a mom as well. So raising two beautiful boys, one of which I had the blessing to raise Matthew for 16 wonderful years. And you do as much as you can as a parent and trying to raise them the right way. And you just hope for the best, right? So, uh, obviously, with everything that happened with Matthew, I shifted with what I was doing with my life. And, I do still, I have a job that helps pay the bills, but my passion is with the foundation and running that alongside with Matt. Well, actually, we fired him, but that's a different story, and I'll let him share.
I'm Matt Mangine. I'm Kim, unfortunate for her husband, and a father to two beautiful, young men. Now that we're getting older, they're, young men, and I've been in medical sales almost my entire career for 25 years. Great to be a part of this foundation. Again, same as Kim, if you would have told me that I would have left the business that I was in for over 20 years and now be, actually working with Zoll Medical and selling AEDs, I would have told you you were crazy because I, had a long established career there. But obviously, after um, June 16th of 2020, everything changed for both of us. And I'm lucky enough to now be, with a company that I'm truly passionate about. And, mainly I'm at Zoll because Kim told me that she could no longer work with me on a daily basis. And she fired me from the foundation. So I get limited duties now. They just have me speak and do things like this. But that's how I ended up with Zoll Medical is because Kim couldn't work with me any longer. She said I was too taxing.
Oh, that is refreshingly beautifully real. That is hilarious. I'm glad that you went to work for Zoll because that's actually how I came to know of the One Shot Foundation through one of our calls for the Life Saving Summit. And I had reached out to Kristen because I love Zoll. I like their brightly colored AEDs and I like the anything can happen, anyone can help, like motto and stuff. So it was awesome when you were like, I work for Zoll because of this. So I actually, that's how I actually found out about the One Shot Foundation and about you both. And so, unfortunately, we had like a flat tire. We got a flat tire on the way down to the Life Saving Summit, but that's how we missed meeting you guys there. But that's how I found out about you with Zoll. So how long have you been with Zoll?
It'll be a year in May,
Oh, wow, a
so
year.
not quite a year yet.
So Kim, do you miss him? Are you regretting that you fired him?
Um,
We are 100 feet away from each other right now in our respective offices. She still has to put up with me on a daily
I do.
basis.
I do. I
She
do.
demands more of me now when I she wants something from Zoll. She can walk right into my office and tell me to make it happen.
Yeah, it seems like that. I guess that was a power move.
Yeah, I now work for her even more.
No, and
Aha.
I kind of alluded to this earlier, off record, Monica, but I think, what Matt and I do, we have our different strengths that we both bring to the foundation, and it's a good duo. So I keep Matt on his toes with everything, and yeah, it's a great team. So
I
It,
love
and
it.
And we
And the
have two
thing,
additions to our team. So he always jokes and he says that it took two people to replace him. So
running a foundation is no different than running a business, right? Like we're trying to keep it to survive and move forward. And that's the thing is we have a great board. We have, two great people that we hired about a year ago, right after I left to take the job at Zoll. And it's amazing how fate and life work because as I was talking to Zoll and looking at leaving, because I left my old position and ran the foundation for a year on my own. And I will say it's overwhelming, right? Because I'm playing all the roles. I'm playing the trainer to the business manager to the finance director, helping raise money. So we ended up hiring two wonderful people. Lauren White, who's an athletic trainer, certified athletic trainer, loved our program, did it at her high school. She happened to call me one day and said, I want to come to work for the foundation. I love everything you do about it. And I laughed and I said, this could be perfect timing. This might be able to work out. And then Jessica Salyers came to us, has been a longtime friend, has been involved with the foundation from the beginning. She's got over 20 years of experience in raising money and doing grants for organizations. And she came to us and said the same thing. I'm looking for my next, position and kind of want to, would love to look at the opportunity of working with you guys. So it ended up being the best of both worlds. And then I still support Kim. Kim's our, executive director, and all three of them do a great job. I serve my purposes, and they tell me what they need from me, and it's been a great addition, because I do joke that two people took my position, but it's in all reality, all three of them combined are doing way more than I ever could have imagined with the foundation, and I still support them as much as I can, which is wonderful.
Yeah, it seems like a great business like collaboration because of course foundations, I mean inadvertently kind of like a small business. And so a lot of times you are doing so many roles. So that's really awesome. It seems like it has grown to where it's comfortable for everybody and then that partnership or collaboration with Zoll is spot on. So I mean, I think that just works out wonderfully. Why don't you guys tell me a little bit maybe about before the One Shot Foundation, what led you to start the foundation? Tell us a little bit more about Matt Jr. And then go ahead and tell us about the One Shot Foundation because we've been alluding to it, but we haven't really told everybody what the One Shot Foundation is.
yeah, so as I mentioned before, we had 16 wonderful years with Matthew, but unfortunately that was cut short. Um, and Matthew was again, you do your best to raise the kind of people that you want out in the community. And Matthew was that kid. He didn't know a stranger. You can't teach a caring heart. And he had that, and from everything he did in life, we had people come up to us. I was just thinking about a story the other day. We went to Orlando a lot with the boys for spring break or vacation. And Matthew was, I don't know, he was probably 13, 14 years old at the time. And he always made friends when we went out of town. And there was a dad that came over to us at the pool and he said, are you Matthew's parents? And we were like, oh no. And we said, well, yes. And he said, well, I just want to tell you, you're raising a very, a very good boy. And, sorry. But and I think that coming from somebody that you have, no ties to, you don't know them at all. It's just it's reassuring to know that you're doing the best that you can as a parent. So, but that's the kind of kid that Matthew was. And I think we had touched on the fact that he was an organ donor. That was his choice. And I was actually surprised when I found out that I didn't see what he had filled out on his paperwork when he went to get his driver's license. But to find that out after the fact, and it was just one conversation that I had with him, but that was the kind of person he was he just wanted to help others. So I feel like what we do through the foundation is, keeping his legacy alive and doing what he would have done.
That is beautiful, a beautiful testament to who he was. Um, so tell us about the One Shot Foundation and what the One Shot Foundation, how you came up with the name.
So we started the foundation on in March of 2021, and it was probably a little sooner than we were prepared to do, both mentally and all aspects, physically, everywhere, emotionally. But we wanted to kind of kick everything off with a golf outing. We live in a great community that, we have ties to a golf course. I know everybody there, and I had reached out to them early on and said, we're going to do a memorial golf outing and potentially use this to kick everything off. And we have some great friends that surrounded us, and they started a memorial fund, and there was a good amount of money in there. And we were trying to figure out what we were going to do and how we were going to do it. And again, my father's a athletic trainer by trade at the University of Cincinnati. We had a lot of great connections. How do we make a difference and keep this lasting? So we started kind of frameworking some ideas in November of 2020, about, a few months after Matthew passed. We weren't really ready for it. And I get a phone call from the golf course, and we were looking at like August or September of the following year. And I get a phone call and they said, we know the date you'd probably want, and that's what we're going to do. That date just opened up, and it's yours for life. So it's now the same week that he passed. So it's that second week of June every year. And that kind of started a cascading bunch of events because now we were way behind the eight ball, and it's getting close to Christmas time, and we got to figure out how we're going to get this up off the ground. We had to get a board set up, again, all the things that go with setting this up. And that's as, also we're going through, a lawsuit about his passing. We're, living our working and lives, and it was just a lot of stuff all at once. So we got what we could, got it together, started in March, and we had our initial golf outing in June. I think it was June 12th that year is the way the date fell. But it's always that second Monday. This year it's June 8th because, again, the way the weeks fall, I think June 1st is like that other Monday, but usually it falls within the same week of his passing. And, once we got that date, that just started steamrolling. And then from there, it's gone to, we wanted to obviously honor him. So it started out as the Matthew Mangine Jr. Foundation. And when they came to me, they said, "Hey, we need a tagline." And sitting in my office, and I said, I got something, but it's dumb, and it's something between me and Matthew, and I don't want to say it out loud." And they were like, "What is it?" I said, "One shot." And they were like, "Oh my God, that's great." I said, "Yeah." That was just kind of Matthew and my thing back and forth. I used to joke with him. I said, you only have one shot at life. Don't screw it up, and make sure you leave lasting impressions on people, right? Like that's the way it works. And I said, and it translates through everything. I mean, I used to tell him at soccer, you only got one shot, and that one shot can be the difference between winning and losing. I might or might not have stole that from a national famous rapper, but at the same time it does, well, true with life. And then as we were going along, the Matthew Mangine Jr. Foundation is really hard to say. We had like our hats made for the first golf outing. They said MMJF, and people would ask. They were a great conversation starter. Like, what are those random initials? And Kim and I were at a pool on vacation, and somebody had asked, and I went through the whole story, and they said, "Man, we'll look that up." And I'm walking away, and I'm thinking, Mangine's not Smith. That's not an easy name for people to remember it, or even how to guess how to spell it. Like that's a miss. We're kind of missing the marketing side of this. Like we want to honor Matthew's honor, but we need to make this easier. So we kind of all regrouped, and it took about a year. And honestly, it took some convincing for Kim because it kind of takes Matthew's name and puts it to the back seat a little bit. But at the end of the day, we're here about a cause, not just about Matthew, right? There's kids dying every day, and this is about a cause. So that's how we've kind of, morphed into one shot. And one shot's easy to remember. And when somebody asks, I talked to three people this week and they said, "Where do I go for this?" Oh, it's simple, one shot life. And that's where, our webpage goes to. We're still, the Matthew Mangine Jr. One Shot Foundation, but One Shot is easier. And honestly, it really focuses on what we want to do because we know in those first 3 minutes are so essential. You've only got one shot to do everything that we need to do right with starting CPR, getting an AED, and delivering that first shot that it all felt kind of right.
I think that was great advice, and thank you for sharing that with all of us because you do only have one shot, and I love the lyrical reference. So that was great, and it is catchy, and visually it appeals, you know what I mean, to a lot of things, and you know what I mean. I think marketing wise, I think that was a good move. Although the Mangines, I mean, at least it's not Smith because if we Google Mangines, you don't have to sort through everything. So they might
Yeah.
have been. Right, the one shot is pretty, but that is you got one shot. Um, so uh will you guys be able to talk about, I guess, how everything unfolded um and during that event?
Even if Kim can, I can.
Well, I kind of figured, okay, well, whoever wants to handle that.
I'll start with what I can, and honestly, I tend to direct people. So ESPN did a really good piece on us on Outside the Lines that can be found on is it YouTube, right, Matt?
YouTube, yeah.
Yeah. And I think that that paints a really vivid picture. It was kind of one of those things early on. It was a big decision whether we made that, whether we moved forward with that piece. And my biggest thing is, you know, I guess it's a blessing in disguise that I was actually there that night that Matthew collapsed. So I witnessed what transpired. And what I can tell you was chaos. But I think that that video really, like I said, paints a pretty vivid picture of what the nightmare that I lived that night. And one of the biggest things that I can say to people is um, don't assume anything. Don't assume plans are in place. Be proactive and be aware yourself. Matt, I don't know
Definitely.
if you have any other.
Well, and I think the biggest thing from that night is what we've learned
Mm.
is one, the number one thing that people need to understand and learn is recognition of cardiac arrest. And if you're unsure or anything, when somebody collapses, you need to, number one, first cause is it's a cardiac arrest. And you need to, enact your emergency action plan. And, after Matthew's passing, and by filing a lawsuit, a lot of it was to find answers. What happened that night and why weren't things done the way it should have been. The first time, and again, I coached football. It was years before, really before AEDs became prominent. I knew what an AED was. I didn't realize, all the ins and outs of it because I'd been out of, sports for a long time. But the first question that my dad asked me as he walked in the door that night was, where was the AED? And I said, I don't know. I said, because I kept asking, does he have a pulse? What is going on? And this is a frantic phone call between me and Kim over the phone as Joseph and I are flying in the car to meet them at the hospital. And we ended up beating the ambulance to the hospital. And again, that was what my only question was from the beginning is, does he have a pulse? And I can only imagine or people can only imagine, they don't know. Kim doesn't know, right? I'm talking to anybody that I can, not getting information. This is in a 20-minute span, right? Of just mass chaos and craziness. The problem is the first call that Kim made to me was he's having a seizure. Again, what we know now, that is the first sign of a cardiac arrest, right? And even if somebody was having a seizure, they come right back around. But seizure-like activity goes for multiple minutes, and if you don't start that CPR right away and activate to get that AED, minutes are precious. The closest AED was 250 feet away. It was not listed on the emergency action plan because the school year hadn't started yet, so they hadn't done their annual EAP review. So it was a new building. Doors were locked either way. The coach sent a parent to go get the athletic trainer who walked around the building and walked past all the rest of the AEDs on his way to the athletic trainer. By the time he and the athletic trainer made it back, it had been 12 minutes and EMS was now on the scene. Matthew's first shock didn't come until 12 minutes, even though that AED was only 250 feet away. So as we started looking at the foundation, how do we make a difference? It's not, I could give, as I joke to everybody, we could be Oprah Winfrey and everybody gets an AED. Is it really going to change survival rates? Potentially not. Why? People do not recognize cardiac arrests and people do not activate getting an AED fast enough in this country. So that's where when we started the foundation, we partnered with UC Emergency Medicine and they showed us it's called Take 10. And it's Take 10 training. It's hands only CPR for the average person to learn and to do multiple times a year so that they get that muscle memory. That's one of the things with CPR training is it's once every 2 years. And I mean, both the coaches there were CPR certified, still didn't recognize cardiac arrest. Luckily, in the parking lot, one of the parents is also a physician. When he got there a few minutes after Matthew went down, he recognized what it was and started CPR right away. But up to that point, Matthew wasn't even receiving CPR. So when you looked at the whole thing together, you recognized like if the emergency action plan would have been activated and everything would have worked out, I'm sure that we would be sitting here having a different conversation about our son who's in college right now, but had suffered a cardiac arrest and survived. So again, those are the things that I think made us the most angry. And I think it was that anger and finding out details and learning everything that we learned that drove us to to start the foundation, to change I mean, our life paths, right? Like everything, our entire lives now revolve around this. And I think it was that anger that drove us in the beginning. Again, it's all estimates. Well, there's a lot
Right.
of gaps in coverage of things, and ESPN kind of goes into that, but um, you know, when there's a gap, right? And
Right.
as we know, if CPR is not started right away and you don't start to run to find that AED, I mean, every minute is precious. And when we looked at from the time he roughly went down to when EMS got on the scene, put the defibrillator on him and gave and administered his first shock, it was about 12 minutes. And as we know about statistics, anything over 10 minutes, even if they would have gotten his heart back, from an oxygen deprived, brain activity, it wouldn't have been good for him. And I remember, when I got to the hospital, I followed the team into the trauma room. And, while they worked on him for another 20 minutes and, being a surgical sales rep in an operating room, it wasn't anything I had seen before. I understood what they were talking about. And when they started talking about, O2 levels and things like that, I knew we were, fighting a downhill battle that wasn't going well. Um, so yeah, I think that was the hardest part for me is I knew what was going on that night, unlike a lot of parents that show up in those environments and it is chaotic. But from the minute I got out of my car and saw him get out of the ambulance, I knew it wasn't it wasn't good. There's two scenarios, right? There's action and getting everything that's done supposed to be done, CPR right away, AED, that person is back, at 3 to 5 minutes talking to the rescuers. They don't remember it. I've talked to a lot of survivors. They don't remember anything of the event. And every parent that I talk to, I try to reach out through any source possible to, offer our support and condolences and to help give them, you know, navigation tools to get through that first year, which is the most difficult. And every parent that I talk to, you could tell their story right next to ours, and it's identical, right? Wasn't recognized. If I hear seizure one more time, I'm going to lose my mind. But that's really the biggest thing in every loss is they thought that that person was having a seizure and they were just trying to support their head and call 911. And again, as we know, that's not what is happening. And if CPR was started right away and an AED, again, it's just like every survivor story, right? Everybody knew what to do. They did it. And that's why that person is here. And unfortunately, that's as a nation that's something that we shouldn't do. We need to be practicing CPR. It should be a life skill that's taught almost from birth, just like we were taught fire drills in school. Stop, drop, and roll. We know that. We know to go to the closest exit. We know those simple basic things. CPR is not something difficult. It is easy to learn. All CPR is good CPR. I mean, obviously, the more you practice it, the better you're going to get. So the more effective it's going to be. But everybody needs to understand CPR, calling 911, and getting
I was
AEDs.
just gonna say, the most frustrating part about all of that is in what we know now, this is not anything new. This has been going on for decades upon decades, and stats have not changed. And a lot of people, and Matt will probably speak to this too, but since the Damar Hamlin incident, that's when people started paying attention because it was on national TV. But we've been saying the same thing and teaching these same stats and processes since Matthew passed. But even before Matthew, this is nothing new. And that's the most frustrating part is, we do the, active shooter drills and the fire drills, which are all very important things, but cardiac arrest is and remains to be the leading cause of death in the US. So where's what are we missing?
Do you think people feel like this won't happen to them, or it's like not, something that's, oh, that happens to somebody else? Do you think there's some of that effect? Do you think that's why people are maybe hesitant?
I do, because I was that person. It wasn't on my radar. I had a healthy student athlete. Now, Matt will also tell you probably that, our family also, because of his dad being the associate athletic director at the time at UC, um, we were more prone to being proactive with making sure the boys were healthy athletes, and the all of it, hydration, keeping healthy, good habits, things of that nature. But cardiac arrest wasn't on my radar. I didn't, why would it be?
I think that's just the human condition, right? But again, you have those people that run into a fire and you have those people that watch and call 911. It's not bad to be that person that doesn't want to do CPR, but as long as you can direct somebody else. I was teaching a high school class one time and I had 45 minutes and we were just kind of talking at the end. And I asked the whole class after teaching them, take 10 training, teaching them how to do CPR, all that stuff. And I said, who would be comfortable doing this? And I had three of the female students raise their hand and said, I do not want to do CPR, didn't feel comfortable enough doing it. And I said, I understand that. Could you tell somebody what to do? And could you call 911 and go get the AED? And they said, yeah. I said, well, then that's your role. I said, know your role in an emergency. And if you're not comfortable giving CPR, and at the end of the day, if you're by yourself, you might just have to do it. And I think you need to just recognize that fact that you might have to be the first person starting CPR and screaming your head off as you're calling 911 for help, help, help until someone else can be there. And again, not everybody is going to be doing CPR in that instance of a cardiac arrest. You're going to be most likely in a group of people. Think about a plane. I've been on a plane where they're asking for a medical professional, right? And you might have five people that jump up and you might have one, but it does take that one person. And as we teach groups of people, the importance of it, you don't have to be that lucky person in a room full of people because out of 10 people, four or five of them would be ready to jump in and do what's needed to save that person's life. And,
And
and
I
the way
think
I teach it to a lot of other people, like athletic trainers and things like that, teach your staff. Why? Because it might be you. How well and effective were you at teaching your staff to save your life? Your life is in their hands. So the worse job you do, the less your life matters to yourself. So you better be doing the best job that you can to teach those that surround you how to save their lives or how to save your own life.
I was going to ask you if there was something you wanted to say to like the staff members and the coaches, and I think that might have been it.
Yeah. We've actually had an athletic trainer friend of ours who taught an entire youth coaches organization because he felt that it was necessary. He does a lot of great stuff with the foundation. His name is Mike Quinn. I've known him since I was this tall. He was actually a student trainer with my dad in high school. That's how far back I've known him. And
Mhm.
he taught all the coaches at his daughter's youth soccer league, take 10 training over 2 weekends. 2 weeks later, He went for a run after he dropped his daughter off at soccer practice, made it the length of the field about 100 yards and collapsed of a cardiac arrest. Those two coaches, who the only training they had was from him 2 weeks prior, got to him, started CPR, called 911, and the ambulance was there within 4 minutes and shocked his heart back into rhythm. And he's here today because of that. And he does a ton of training because he understands how important it is now.
Definitely, he surely does. And he was a good thing he was advocating beforehand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm. What do you think like schools and organizations are still like falling short?
I like him to take this one because it drives her the craziest the most.
You mean just from the aspect, well, we don't want to be um, the people to call anybody out. We want to be a resource to everybody, right? But the frustration is if we're gonna, as a foundation, we don't charge for our services, we don't charge for the equipment that we provide to allow for the Take 10 training sessions. Um, because we don't want to have that barrier. But when we have, I think there's good intentions, right? So you have schools and organizations that take on a training, but then it's the follow up behind that, right? Like the consistency with it after that. So again, we don't want to, we don't want to call anybody out for anything, but it's, what is preventing people from being proactive with it. And so we're actually in the middle of doing some research on that on our end as a foundation to try to figure out what the barriers are.
Well, that kind of leads into another area of inquiry I had. I kind of wanted to know what were you working to change right now? So that kind of sounds, you guys are really
Yeah.
good at this. This is kind of going transition, transition. This is great. So you tell us, can you share a little bit more about the research that you guys are looking to do or what questions you're hoping to answer?
So the program, and I don't know that we've covered this yet, the program is our Take 10 program. And our
Yeah.
goal is to donate the equipment to a school or organization and for them to do that training quarterly, kind of like fire drills. So the goal, what are the barriers that we've heard from schools? Funding, things like that. We already have people that know CPR. Take 10 is you don't need to go out and be a CPR certifier. This is, and we want to teach the kids, right? We want to teach the kids, and we want the teachers and administrators in a school that are CPR certified need to have that and carry it to practice within that 2 year period. Because again, when you get that CPR certification, what happens if this cardiac arrest happens 1 year and 11 months later? How well are you going to be prepared to jump down and do this CPR? So it's kind of a practice, not a whole full training. This is doing it like a fire drill.
Train that next generation of lifesavers, right? And it's all about repetition. Our program can be done quickly so that it can be repeated multiple times in a year. And when, and I think Matt said this quite a bit too, but nobody got good at their job doing it once a year. So we would love to see that next generation of lifesavers having done this so many times repetitively. It goes back to that muscle memory concept, right? So when they go out there in life, um, they're just, that's their natural reaction, is to be able to step in and do what needs to be done in an emergency situation when someone has collapsed.
I think it started in Austin, Texas, is an
Hmm.
initiative, and then the University of Cincinnati saw it somewhere. I think it's been, oh gosh, close to 15 years ago now, and they brought it to Cincinnati. UC Emergency Medicine team started it here in Cincinnati. They showed it to us, and we've really exploded it here in Greater Cincinnati. I think we've gone as far away as Salt Lake City. Had a medical student, see our story somewhere and reached out. So we sent him, a Take 10 bag, which is just 20 of the Mini-An, little blow up mannequins in a basic Preston AED trainer. We sent it out to him, and he does trainings out there as part of his being a medical student at BYU. That's, I would say, the furthest away we've kind of had a reach so far, but we're expanding out, regionally here. Again, it's about you need the right person that wants to do this to, reach out to us. We can't force it down people's throats. That's one of the things that we found. If you don't have that right person in the building that wants to take this on, it's not going to work. And we found that with some schools, you get them the equipment, you do everything, and then you go back and do your follow-up and find out that that bag is collecting dust in a closet. It frustrates us. And that's where we're trying to help where we can. Having Lauren on board now is again, a former uh, uh, high school athletic trainer that did this program exclusively. She actually was at Taylor High School that did our pilot program to see how well we could get this to work.
Mhm.
And Taylor has trained countless times, you know, thousands of kids that have gone through Taylor over the last 5 years have gotten this training. And again, it puts 1,000 lifesavers out in the world that have now done basic CPR and AED use multiple times by the time they graduated.
Wow, yeah, that is awesome. I'm gonna have to definitely, I got that down here in my little notes.
And
Um,
sorry.
mhm. No, please.
Well, I was just going to say, I think, one of the other Take 10 is a great segue into training, where you don't have to be certified, right? And I think, Monica, you had touched on that earlier, where your program isn't certification and neither is ours, but that's the whole point, right? It's to have that understanding that you don't have. That's one of the fears. That's one of the hesitations, is that somebody has to be trained, professionally trained or certified. So we're trying to take that stigmatism out of that.
Yeah,
I mean, mainly at the younger population too. Like we
Yeah.
found out that most states offer an entire credit for kids to be CPR certified. And when I bring that up to people, they're like, we didn't even know that. I'm like, there is state funding for you to get to certify these kids, but still practice it, right? And keep doing. And again, it's a train the trainer model. So it's not us doing the trainings. This is I remember speaking about this somewhere and explaining it to people, and somebody goes, it's kind of like the Amway of CPR training. I said, it is because we can train anyone to do it, right? You don't have to be a CPR certified instructor to teach this. I personally would rather have somebody that is CPR certified to teach this basic skill. But, a good example of somewhere that it worked was in Columbus. We had a mom and a boy who reached out to us that was involved with the foundation. And he said, can I get a bag? I want to train all of our youth soccer organization, and I'm doing it as my senior project. So over 2 years, he trained everybody in his youth soccer league, and his mom oversaw the whole project, and they monitored and kept track of everything, and they used it as a senior project, which is great, right?
yeah.
That's kind of where it needs to go. It is. It is a good joke. It's the Amway of CPR training, but it'll get it out to the general public. I mean, if we're not going to do national PSAs about how important it is, this is the closest thing we can get. But I would love to see CPR get, national recognition, like when you're watching sports or something, just general TV. Did you know that this is going to be the most likely thing in your life that is, natural that you're going to come across that you might have to jump in and do. Again, it would be awesome to get those kind of things. There's just it all comes down to money, unfortunately. And that's where we like to invest in ours is invest in these bags that we, get schools to utilize and try to train as many people from a, kids aspect. They're sponges. And if we train them multiple times. By the time they go to college, they're going to be way better than we were and better equipped to handle this than we were when we got to that level. Like
I
that's why we don't teach any breaths or anything like that. And I joke, like unless you're a medical professional, you don't know what you're doing, so you probably aren't getting it right because you hadn't done it in a year and a half. So guess what? Just do the chest compressions and get that AED on. And honestly, like I don't teach people to go. Somebody asked me at a training, like, "Well, what about the pulse?" I'm like, "Did you go to medical school? No. Do you think that you could find a pulse when you're freaking out and you're panicking? No. If that person doesn't respond, start doing CPR. The worst thing that happens is they wake up and slap you across the face and say, "What are you doing to me?" You're not a like, right? Like CPR is most likely going to be done by a non-medical professional on you to save your life. And that's the thinking we need to get people to do is you could change the outcome of somebody's life just by simple starting CPR and calling for an AED and calling 911. Those three things would change. I mean, AEDs have been around since the mid 2000s, and I would say a bigger capacity. But
Mhm.
some of the studies that I find, they're still only used in a very small amount of cardiac arrests. What does that tell you? It tells you that people don't even know what an AED is. You know, like I joke, I go to these things like the Sudden Cardiac Arrest Summit and everything else, and I tell and the one thing I tell everybody, find 10 people that you know have no clue and tell them about it and get them to tell 10 more people because that's the only way we're going to solve this is if everybody is aware of what to do and what's going on, even if it's verbal, right? Like, oh my gosh, I remember that thing in the back of my head that somebody said to me 5 years ago in a situation, and it's amazing how you can recall it and use it in an emergency.
It is truly amazing. And it is still amazing that we're still hovering at that 10% despite all the advancements that we've made. It kind of ironically, now that I've done all this research about CPR history, it's kind of like it's always been that struggle to first get people to understand the CPR. Now we're still struggling at getting people to recognize what to do. And so, okay, yes, let's take out the pulse check. Let's take out, worrying about how deep. If you can press hard and fast, let's not worry about things that are going to make it more difficult to act. Just encouraging that hands-only CPR, I think, is great. So I'm really, I know the push call shock, you know what I mean? But this take 10 training where this is the first that I've heard other than, someone like me maybe wanting to do, updates and some of us on a business model, but this is the first. I'm not saying there aren't others, but this is the first like kind of nonprofit that I've heard of encouraging the repetitive, treatment. I get people are trying to, I mean, repetitive treatment, Lord have mercy, repetitive training is what I was trying to say. Um, that repeat muscle memory training. We talk about the muscle memory, we talk about making sure that our mannequins are high quality, interacting, but I would love to see, the trainings more often because, if you don't use it, you lose it. If you've done CPR, you might not lose it for a while. But being able to, you're right. Like I teach the heart saver classes sometimes too. So of course you've got some overachievers, so they want to check a pulse. But yeah, I'm like, honestly, emergency situations are never textbook. It's going to be you falling on the knowledge that you are comfortable retrieving. So I'm trying to put things in your knowledge storehouse bag. So that way when things hit the fan, you're pulling from a high quality set of skills that you are comfortable administering.
Mhm.
Um, and so sometimes, I mean, of course, I think the tools are important, but I definitely think the training and, exposure more often is going to really get that and really recognizing because like you say, people thinking things are seizures or not even thinking that, hey, this could be like we got to put that out of our head. Like this is a child. It can't be sudden cardiac arrest. That's a seizure. You know what I mean? It's like we do have to kind of get that patterned thinking together. And I think it may be something big like with CPR where it's taking a lot of people and a lot of steps and a lot of heartbreak and desperation for us to get the lessons so we can make a pattern that's better going forward.
Yep, 100%.
Um, so this wasn't exactly it's not really far out there, but I didn't actually put this on our kind of prep questions, but um what have you guys been doing maybe for mental health, type stuff? It sounds like, of course, at first maybe the One Shot Foundation in and of itself was kind of cathartic and, mental health ish. But are you guys doing anything else to kind of self-care or tips you can give others?
For ourselves. Wow. You forget about that part, right? Um, I think that definitely you're spot on. The foundation is our outlet. And just speaking about it and being able to I love to talk about Matthew. I think a lot of folks think don't bring it up, don't talk about it kind of thing. And I feel the very opposite. So this gives me that opportunity. But I think, and that goes to say within our little family network too, right? Like I think that's important. And we we have a younger son, Joseph, who he's been affected by this too, right? So it's being mindful of that in his mental health as well. So I think, as a family, we talk about Matthew, we do things in his honor. So I think collectively that's really good for us. And just speaking about it in general, for me, just keeping busy, working out. I find myself I get in a rut. And when I'm not active and I'm not, burning that energy, you get in a rut for sure. So whether it's, sports or working out, and reading, I've read some self-help books, and just to hear, others that are going through similar things, I think is helpful. We do support groups too. We're part of those, which is also helpful.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I had a psychologist that was working with Kim and I say, men and women are different, and men have a tendency to bury things deep down inside. And he looked at me and he said, "You haven't even started to deal with your grief." And that was about 2 years in. And, again, I think I use the outlet of the foundation as, a channeling of a lot of my grief. The anger at the beginning. Uh, again, the first 2 years, it's hard to describe how hard that is to get through that. The first year, especially, even the second year, it doesn't get any easier to this day. As I always like to say, it's a different path forward, and having a mission and something to channel my energy to is good. Um, Talking about Matthew all the time almost makes me feel like he's still with us all the time. He's still that 16-year-old boy here. And sometimes, somebody brings up, well, God, she'd be 22 right now. And it's like, I can't think that way. To me, he's unfortunately always going to be 16, even when I'm 70. That's the hardest thing. You can't think what ifs. You just have to move forward. And, you know, looking back, it doesn't help anything. Just forging a path forward is it's weird to say. And I work with a few other families that it's hard, right? And there's nothing I can I start every conversation. I wish there was something I could do or say to take all this pain away, but there's not. It's just you have to find your own path, and I promise you will. And I'm not, everybody does it differently, but you know, it's hard. And I will tell you, we're in a way different position today than we were even just 3 years ago.
And I look back and I don't, it's, it is literally, people say one step in front of the other, one foot in front of the other. And I look back, I mean, faith too, right? That's a big part of it. But some things are a blur. And maybe that's for a good reason. And that's part of grief, right? But it's still a pain a pain an ache in my heart every day. And I don't, I think my thing is I don't want anybody else to have to go through this. And that's what drives me forward, because this is awful. I mean, it is just unimaginable. So if we can prevent that, then we've done the best we can.
And it was
Which
one of those conversations, how many parents expect to be sitting in a room, in an emergency room, talking to a coroner that's letting you know what all the next steps are, as we're also trying to, get a priest to last right. I mean, everything nightmarish that night was going through the motions. I can remember at one point thinking I should be crying, but it felt like I wasn't even in my body. It was an out of body experience, and it's a million things. And obviously Kim was a mess, so now it all falls on me, and I'm trying to make decisions. And when we got to organ donation, and she said he checked the box that he wanted to do it, but because he was under 18, we still got to make the final decision. And that was the easiest decision I made that night because I said if he made it, that's his choice, and go with that. But you
And I
know,
still think that, what was donated, one, that was his decision. And that again, it goes back to the type of person that he was. And regardless of what it was, it's still, a piece of him lives on through that donation in my eyes. So anything is a positive from that respect.
people don't recognize that, right? Like it's hard to know. Um, again, I learned a lot that night because I was asking the same questions you were, and I got I got an education, and
Yeah.
I wasn't prepared for that. And I think I had to have that conversation with the bank at like 11 o'clock the night he passed because I had to go through and sign all the forms and you're still getting phone calls. We were up all night, obviously, we're not going to sleep. So, I mean, again, it's a
I
lot of
would
things you never expected to do that you now have to, the next day, what are we doing? We're looking for cemetery plots, right? Like you don't you know what I mean? Like you're not planning for all of this. The next morning at 8 a.m. we were in a psychologist office that was a friend that I texted that night because before while we were still at the hospital I said I need to get them into you right away, like you know what happened, and he said yes, and he goes be here at 8 in the morning because again what I don't know what to do, right? Like so Kim and Joseph and I went in and met with the psychologist the morning after to how do we get a path forward? And then later that day, we were with my parents and we're driving around and we're looking at cemetery plots. Like you don't think about these things, like, and you're just going through that first week. You're just going through the motions. You're meeting with the funeral director. You're planning out a funeral, and I remember sitting in that conversation and looking at after, you know, heated discussions about when and what to do, and the funeral director said, "Stop." He goes, "You guys are all sports people. I got a playbook we just did on a young athlete, youngish, like in his 30s, who died suddenly." And he goes, "We just did something like this." And I looked at him and I said, "Lewis, you're my adult, you're adult. You make all decisions moving forward. This is your show. You ask us what we need, what we should make decisions on, and we're going from there. You're in charge the rest of the week." And Lewis and I have become great friends since then. It's I never I would tell you I would Lewis and I probably would have never met it, except for in passing, if it wasn't for that. And now we see each other on a continuous basis. The relationships that Matthew's passing has forged is awesome. And unfortunately, I wish I wouldn't had to have had him because of his passing, if that makes sense.
when you walk into a situation, whatever that may be, I think if you walk into any situation, you should be able to ask yourself, what would I do if somebody collapsed right now? Obviously, schools, are different than if you walk into your local grocery store. But, that's one thing that I do encourage parents, coaches, teachers, whoever, to think about that. What would I do? What are those steps? Start asking questions. And when you start asking those questions, I think it leads to that preparedness aspect, right? So if I'm asking, what would I do? Okay, well, where's the AED? What is going on in this situation, and recognize it. So I don't know. To me, that's asking the questions helps with being prepared, and being prepared for an emergency situation, cardiac situation, is rescue ready, in my opinion.
Kim brings up a good point. How many people think about when they walk into any room where the closest AED is? And that's what people need to do. And then number two is recognition, right? Like we talked about. You need to be, everyone in the United States needs to recognize what a sudden cardiac arrest looks like. And if Dr. Dresner has a great video. It is athletic related, but it works for everything. But it's the signs of sudden cardiac arrest. And if you watch that video, it really details what a cardiac arrest looks like. People are still moving, there's breathing, there's activity. I think a lot of people, if we just picked up the phone and called somebody and put them on this podcast right now and said, "What is a cardiac arrest?" People just drop dead. That's what the average person thinks. They don't realize that there's levels and that the faster you act, the easier it is to bring that person back. So recognition is number two after walking into a room and seeing what tools do I have at my disposal if they need to be used.
And I think having that mental state, like, I love that you guys are reflecting on that being, you need to be prepared to be looking for those things. So, like if something happens, I'm prepared and where it is so I can prepare and what's going on. I do think those are three steps that we don't emphasize enough. We say them, but really, really imparting that knowledge, it shows that obviously we're missing it because we're thinking about seizures or not seeing the situations at all. So,
I mean, here's a question. You ever walk in somewhere and been uncomfortable because you know if something bad happened that it wouldn't be a good outcome? Like in a group of people, I don't know. I mean, I've been
mhm.
there, right? Like at a
Yeah,
concert or something like that. Like
yeah.
you get that feeling like this doesn't
Mm-hmm.
feel safe. And it's not safe from the
Yeah,
people around you. It's safe and it's an unsafe environment. Like if something bad happens right now, there
that's
is
the point.
no it's not going to end well, right? Like I guess I do look at things different. And I also am really bad about looking for AEDs when I walk into somewhere because most of the time I'm carrying my own. So I just kind of go through life happy-go-lucky, having my own AED that we carry with us a lot of times, right? Like when I ask people where's the closest AED, most of the time it's you know
Right
on
here
me,
with me.
right? So yeah.
I think so. Well, let me ask you guys, how can people support your mission and continue Matthew Jr.'s and Matthew, I guess both the Matthews impact?
Well, I'll say, like I mentioned before, everything we do is as a nonprofit. We don't charge for our training, and the training bags, if people take those on, those are donated so that they can move forward with being prepared. Visit our website, oneshot.life. We survive on two events that we do each year. So we have a golf outing in June, as Matt alluded to, June 8th this year, and then we also do a birthday bash right around his time, his birthday. And both of those events, along with private donations, help. And we have, gotten into small grants from that aspect. So between all of that, that's what keeps us running. So we welcome any help, support, volunteers, donations, all of that.
Thanks again for listening. If you or anyone you know needs to learn CPR, first aid, or a life saving skill, please contact People's Choice CPR and Safety. From CPR to self care, the Wellness Pulse is staying in rhythm with your well being. I'm Monica Stevens. Take care.